Just like Amanda Gorman, Unitarian Universalists believe that there is a poem in each person. There is a story worth telling, a sacred story, not because you are an ancient prophet or some towering giant of intellect, but because your story has worth and your life has worth. Your words have worth and make change. When I was a little girl, I used to sit underneath my grandmother's dining room table. And in her house, I had to be a little more careful about what I would say. But nobody knew what I was writing. So I would hide, and I didn't think anybody knew I was there, but they probably did. And I would hide beneath her lace tablecloth, and I would write poetry about Democrats and and all the things that my grandmother was not in love with. And I would get out all my emotions on those pages, and I would later show them to my mom, and she'd say, "Good job, Julie." Good job. And so that helped me behave. But poetry very early was a place where I felt like I had a voice. And I remember in second grade, we had a teacher who helped us make our own poetry book. I had a book, and it was run and the fun, and it was sunny, and it was all the rhyming words. And I was so proud of this book. I carried it around and I showed everybody. And I truly believe that my family, by entertaining that my voice and that my words were important, helped me become who I am, helped me become a writer and a minister and someone who believes that people's stories are sacred. When in South Carolina, the death penalty is still active, and when I was a little girl, it was also active. And my dad and I would go to death penalty protests or vigils, and I would be holding my cross and my rainbow lanyard for it, and we would sing and pray softly. And I think of the words, that we would sing, like Jesus is love or things like that, and that was our own form of poetry. And when my mom's third husband came into my life, he was an atheist accountant, not like my dad, who was an Episcopal priest, and my stepmom was an Episcopal priest. But this atheist accountant had just as much sacred things to teach me. He taught me how to question. He taught me that Jesus wasn't always the reason for the season. It was the winter solstice. And I remember being really mad at him at the time. But he kept pricking my confidence. His form of resistance was always to call me to think about what I believed. And he was an ex-Marine and definitely a peacenik. He took me to pro-choice rallies, took me to Greenpeace rallies, and the Iraq war protest. And I had a beat-up guitar, and I wrote in my pink fingernail polish, love is the answer, and all sorts of peace things. And we would sing Where Have All the Flowers Gone, and Bob Dylan songs, maybe a little bit more in key, but who knows. The soundtrack of my middle elementary school and my teen years were protest songs, lyrics that prodded me to think and to question. If Curtis, my stepdad, wasn't yelling at the television, he was showing me articles from Mother Jones or encouraging me to read science fiction, because these guys really asked questions about the future, or looking at Omni magazine. And he would only play NPR in the car, and I remember being so mad about that. Why are you playing NPR? I want to listen to 80s music. Well, that was our church. It was listening to NPR, or on Saturday nights, our church was the reading of Shakespeare out loud. We read poetry together, talked about Saturday Night Live skits and what that meant. Curtis was not perfect. He struggled with many things that were hard, but he believed in my mind. He loved when I shared writing with him, and he knew that I could think and question, and that was a way to change the world around me. And I remember thinking early on, who are the people who have done that in America and in the world? As long as there have been musicians and poets and storytellers, that their words have been used for resistance, whether fighting against oppression or stopping a war, or in the wake of so much abuses of power, the right to determine who you are and have autonomy over your own body. Pete Seeger wrote a song in 1997 called "I'm Still Searching." I'm still searching, and yes, I'm still searching for a way that we can learn to build a world where we can all share the work, the fun, the space, the joy, the pain, and no one ever need want to seek to be a millionaire. Pete Seeger spent his life as a seeker. He sought justice and fighting for the rights of workers, for peace and economic equality. And one of the biggest values that Pete held on to was his work with workers' rights, raising awareness during Vietnam, and raising eco-consciousness as an idea that people have worth, and speaking up for that. He said, "I decided that if there is a human race here in 100 years, it will be because we know how to participate with each other, even though we disagree about so many things." And one of the most courageous acts of Pete's life was to risk imprisonment, not only by not implicating friends or fellow musicians. He risked his family's livelihood and everything to speak truth to power. Pete Seeger was summoned before the House of Un-American Activities Committee on August 18th, 1955. And according to Alec Wilkinson, who wrote Pete Seeger, Protest Singer, Seeger wore a tweed suit, a plaid shirt, a yellow tie, and dark pants. The men asked what Pete Seeger did for a living, and he replied, "I'm a student of American folklore, but I made my living as a banjo picker." He was grilled with the intention of pinning him down to an affiliation with the Communist Party, and also trying to require him to reveal the names of other communists. He told the committee, "I'm not going to answer any questions as to my association, my philosophical or religious or political beliefs, or how I voted in any election, or any of these private affairs. I think these are very improper questions for any American to be asked, especially under such compulsion as this. I would be very glad to tell you about my life if you want to hear it." They didn't. He was grilled for an hour and continued to refuse to be baited into a corner, calling their questions very improper. He said the same answer as before, never wavering in the face of their bullying questions. When he was questioned about who he played for, again, he said, "I declined to discuss, under compulsion, where I have sung, who has sung my songs, and who else has sung with me, and the people I have known. I love my country very dearly, and I greatly resent this implication that some places that I have sung, and some of the people I have known, and some of the opinions, whether they are religious or philosophical, or I might be a vegetarian, make me any less of an American. And I will tell you about my songs, but I am not interested in telling you who wrote them, and I will tell you about my songs, but I am not interested in who listened to them." He was excused. Seeger left the hearing knowing that he would be indicted for contempt of Congress, but he stood his ground. The sense of who is American and who is not just a relic of the 1950s. Especially post 9/11, many in our government and in our society have seized a "you're with us" or "you're against us" mentality. And the fact remains that we should be able to question our government. We should be able to question our society and hopefully have discourse where we can talk to one another instead of calling each other names like communist or un-American or whatever other things that we have heard from unfortunate speaking of public officials. Once upon in this great nation, once upon a time, culture dictated that women were relegated to working in the home or pursuits fitting a feminine temperament. Suffragists questioned and were labeled troublemakers, yet they blazed a new way. Women fought for the right to vote, the right to work, and are still fighting for the right to govern their bodies. This was a suffragette poem called "We Are Women." And imagine the time, I think this was 1800s, Charlotte Perkins Gilman. There is a cry in the air about us. We hear it before, behind, of the way in which we as women are going to lift mankind, with our white frocks starched and ruffled, and our soft hair brushed and curled. Hats off! We as women are coming to save the world. Fair sisters, listen 1 minute, and perhaps you'll pause for 10. The business of women as women is only with men as men. What we do as women. We have done all through our life. The work that is ours as women is the work of mother and wife. But to elevate public opinion and to lift up erring man is the work of the human being. Let us do it if we can. And there were so many people who have spoke up, whether for women's rights or all sorts of rights. And so we think about, what is our resistance? How does our voice make a difference? It doesn't have to be in a protest or, speaking up on a news channel. It can be not letting someone tell a racist joke. It might be opening the door for somebody who needs help opening a door. Resistance can be resting when people tell you you should be working 80 hours a week. It might be not buying the newest thing because you need to spend it on something else, or you want to bring extra food to feed my people. So when we think about this idea that words matter and that our poets change the world, all of us are poets of some kind or another, whether it's magnetic poetry or it's something that we look up on the internet. And all of our stories are sacred. So I hope that you'll remember that little girl sitting underneath the table and think about your own story, about when your words matter and when your words make a difference. Amen.